Hello, I'm Clare Lanigan, and just as a quick caveat before I start, this was co-written with two of my colleagues, and I all helped with the development of these guidelines, but I'm not a librarian or an archivist, so I have not much in the way of practical experience working with MARC21. So in the Q&A section, I will try and answer questions you may have, but I may not be able to answer all of them, but any I can't answer, I will refer to my colleagues. So thanks for your patience. So I just wanted to give a quick overview of DRI actually before I get into talking about the guidelines. The Digital Repository of Ireland is a trusted national infrastructure for the preservation, curation and dissemination of Ireland's humanities, social sciences and cultural heritage data. Ours is a repository system flexible enough to handle the 4 most commonly used metadata standards in use within the designated community right now. And in this short talk, I aim to give an overview of the process of selecting metadata standards for guideline productions and the relevant factors involved in developing the MARCXML guidelines, which I will talk about in more detail. So as Ireland's national digital repository, we launched in June 2015. We were built by a consortium of institutions. The current institutions active are the Royal Irish Academy, Trinity College Dublin and Maynooth University. We've built a digital preservation infrastructure, which involves hardware and open access software. And our primary objective is the long-term preservation of objects and data relating to arts, social sciences and humanities. Collections from many major institutions, including the National Library of Ireland, National Museum, National College of Art and Design, University College Dublin, Dublin City Library and Archives, and the Trinity College Dublin, as well as many more smaller and more local archives. We received the data seal of approval in 2015, and then this year we received the updated consolidated version of that, which is the Core Trust Seal, which makes us one of only 2 trusted digital repositories in the country. And everything can be accessed. The web interface for accessing and navigating our collections can be accessed through DRI.IE, where thumbnails can be viewed, and high-quality preservation objects from our collections can be also viewed and downloaded. Our publications, including our metadata guidelines, can be viewed there. And we also have links to projects, resources, events, blog, etc. As an open repository, we encourage publicly accessible data, open access where appropriate, CC BY licensed metadata, and CC licensed objects. We've recently launched a membership model where organizations sign up on a membership program and deposit their collections for long-term digital preservation. Some organizations which have recently signed up include Dublin City Library and Archive, the National Library of Ireland, the Royal Society for Antiquities in Ireland, and Transport Infrastructure Ireland, their archaeological collections. So some of the types of publications that we do include metadata guidelines. These are just images of the PDFs of some of the ones we've had. So you can see we have Dublin Core and the Digital Repository of Ireland. We have EAD, ISAG and the Digital Repository of Ireland, and MODS and the Digital Repository of Ireland. And these are all intended to help people who are working with digital collections and would like to ingest them in the repository to prepare their metadata so that it's compatible with the repository infrastructure. Our metadata guidelines are developed with a view to making multiple, sometimes very different and inconsistent metadata formats appear consistently and be cross-referenceable in the repository. In December 2017, we published the MARC metadata guidelines, which is called MARC21, encoded as MARCXML and the Digital Repository of Ireland. This was the last one we did, and it took a little longer than the others because there was quite a lot of discussion involved in our metadata working group. We have a number of task forces and working groups, and the one devoted to metadata had to spend some time discussing the various aspects of this and teasing out the practicalities. As MARCXML facilitates the sharing of and networked access to bibliographic information worldwide, accurate guidelines on its effective use are very important to the operations of modern and innovative libraries. So it was kind of important that we got this one right. So factors in development of MARCXML guidelines include choosing the appropriate MARC fields that must be selected as mandatory, which you have to map over to the mandatory fields that are used in the Digital Repository of Ireland UI, and deciding which of those you map to, and creating examples that are correct technically and bibliographically. DRI's ingest process selects a minimum set of required fields and recommended fields. It's necessary to give some indication of which fields are mandatory or recommended, etc. within DRI. It's also important that users have some understanding of how their metadata displays within DRI's front end. This is an example of some mandatory MARC fields. This is an image taken from the guidelines themselves, just one of the pages. It might be a little bit small there, but I can kind of run through some of these and why the reasons why they had to be mandatory fields. So type of record is the top one there, and that is type of record, or the metadata element within MARC is /leader/06. Type, in general, is a mandatory DRI field when creating records within the UI, and it's mandatory in Dublin Core. The leader is a mandatory fixed field within a MARC record, and character 06 describes the type of record. So we index this to display as type of record in the UI. 336, which is content type, which is further down in the list, 336 content type, 380 form of work, and 655 index term, genre / form of work are optional bibliographic fields that we've also mapped to type. So that content type is mapped to type as well when they are used. Within the full metadata, all of these fields display in conventional MARCXML format. So there's a few kind of listed of other ones there, like type of record is the top one there, but there's also main or added entries, where you can see there's 100, 110, 111, 700, 710, 711. It's title /245, including subfield A, and the date format there, description, rights. So again, it's mapping as closely as possible to the relevant mandatory form within DRI. So main or added entries, as you can see the second one there, these are the fields that correspond to creator, a mandatory field in DRI. So title, which is 245, including subfield A, corresponds to title, a mandatory field in DRI. Date, or the 008/07-14, or 260, including subfield A, or 264, including subfield C, corresponds to date, a mandatory field in DRI. And then description, some kind of description is necessary. 300 or 500 or 520 corresponds to that. Rights corresponds to 506, 540, 542, including subfield F. So this maps to the mandatory fields in DRI, which are title, description, type, date, creators, and rights. So we index these to the closest equivalent within a metadata record of any standard, and in this case, it was MARCXML. This is a little bit difficult to see. I wasn't able to show you a live example, but MARC values are mapped to DRI UI fields in this. So there's a kind of a conventional human-readable metadata file to one side, and then on the other side, you can see the MARC metadata headings there. So there's leader, and there's record status, type of record, there's terms of availability, language code, various other things like that. And that can also be downloaded as XML. And just to finish up, I'll just show you this MARC record of Joyce's Ulysses, which is kind of a well-known enough item that we can use as a good example. So underneath the label title statement, to try and get the title of the book, being Ulysses, this is how we're showing how the metadata standards of MARC are mapped correctly and bibliographically and technically. So 245 is the equivalent MARC field title statement. Including subfield A is a subfield code, mandatory if you're using MARCXML. That indicates that this title statement is specifically the title proper, as opposed to other kinds of title statements used in MARC. Other kinds of title statement are recommended but not enforced by DRI. So this record also includes an example of one including subfield C, meaning statement of responsibility, in this case the authorship being of James Joyce. So just had to finish on that example of how we took one very specific field and mapped it to MARC, and then how we applied that kind of logic throughout the whole guidelines, and hopefully they will be helpful and useful to people working in bibliographical collections going forward. They're free to download from the website for anyone to use. Thanks very much.